At Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Let me introduce my guest, starting from my farthest right there, Fatima Ahmed Ali, Associate Professor of International Relations at the USIU, also a Fellow at the Global Center for Policy and Strategy, GLOSEPS. Thank you very much for making time. We have Professor Macharia Munene, Historian and Foreign Relations Expert at USIU, Associate Fellow also at the Global Center for Policy and Strategy. Thank you so much for making time. We have Professor Grace Njoroge, Professor of Botany, also a Science and Technology Expert at JQuat and Council Member of the Global Center for Policy and Strategy. Thank you very much for making time. We have Herman Manyora, Communication and Governance, University of Nairobi, Associate Fellow in Global Center for Policy and Strategy. Thank you very much for making time. And Dr. Josephine Ojiambo, Research Associate at the University of Nairobi, former Ambassador of Kenya to the New York, and former Deputy Secretary General, Commonwealth. Thank you very much for making time. I told you, I have a panel of experts. Here they are. And I'll start with you, Fatima. How significant was this trip of the president to the U.S.?
Thank you very much. I think that the trip is very significant in fundamental ways. I mean, first and foremost, it's the first in its kind in 15 years, having an African head of state visit the State House and having this important bilateral relation and meeting in the U.S. Also, I know a lot of us are asking, you know, what's this all about? I think it's a clear renewed interest and effort between Kenya and the U.S. And there is a lot of potential. There's a potential opportunities that have come up, and I think the president has come a lot of things has brought back a lot of things, and a lot of areas that would be important for our country. You know, this includes security, trade, and I think the most important one is investment. And also it boosts the confidence of investors to come and invest in Kenya, because it's clear that Kenya has a conducive environment for investment. So I think it really sheds a lot of light, the potential of Kenya in terms of peace and security, the role Kenya has played, that also is solidified through this relation. Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right, Professor Munene, why the sudden interest, or is it sudden at all?
It is not sudden. It looks it, but it's not. Mm-hmm. I think there is a convergence of interest that has taken place. And I think we should give credit to Meg Whitman. She's achieved something that many other ambassadors have not. To persuade the U.S. government to give President Ruto a state visit. It's not every day that it happens. And any ambassador would like to take that credit. So I think we give credit to Meg Whitman for having worked very hard for that. But the trip, as you say, is a convergence of interest between two men. One man called Joe Biden and another man called William Ruto. So their common interests brought them together. In fact, if you notice from the United Nations floor, Joe Biden was going out of his way to praise William Ruto. Mm-hmm. And William Ruto has also been working very hard to be acceptable in the Western circles as the leader of the Africans. And so the convergence point was on the issue of sending people to Haiti. And if you listen to the speeches there, Biden actually did say he's very grateful to Ruto for agreeing to send what? Because he had looked for countries, other countries, to do it, and they were refusing. Even the Canadians who were just next door there. Mm-hmm. And the US itself had been there before, and it messed up. So there was that concern. Who can agree to go and help deal with the challenge in Haiti?
So you believe that was the convergence point?
Yes.
For a country that finds itself in the rule of law, why would they push an agenda that is actually against the law here? Because the courts have pronounced themselves.
When it did not start that way, it was against the law here. It's something that came afterwards, the court saying, no, don't do that.
Okay.
But when they did reach an understanding that Ruto was going to send people to Haiti to help the Americans deal with the problem there, it was not. Afterwards, people went to court to say, wait a minute, something is wrong. But at the time, one cannot say they were pushing something illegal or unlawful. So I'm saying there was a convergence of interest between Ruto and Biden. And so Biden has been trying to show his gratitude in this thing. If you remember when he talked, he even said he is thanking Ruto not only for Haiti, but also Ukraine. That Biden's adventures in Ukraine, Ruto has been very understanding. If there are apparently not as many African countries as that have shown that understanding. And so that's why it was convergence. Ruto seemed to want that recognition, which Biden was more than willing to give. And the best thing he can do is to give a state visit. And to this particular African who is very forceful and assertive.
All right, let me bring in Professor Njoroge on this. Professor Njoroge, let's talk about this point of convergence that Professor Munene is talking about, especially on the STEM matters, which is just the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. This seems to be another area of collaboration between Kenya and the USA. First of all, what is your assessment of our current situation of STEM education in Kenya? Do we need that sort of support from the US?
Thank you very much, Trevor. And I also want to thank the Global Center for Policy and Strategy for putting us together, those who are associated with them. And just appreciate the fact that among the many conversations that happened when His Excellency the President was in the US, the higher education sector, subsector was not forgotten. And more specifically, the matter of the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. There is enough data, Trevor, to indicate that any country that has really developed or stimulated the economic development and sustained it, the area of STEM is quite critical to boost. And when you look at our vision 2030, it is anticipated that this is one of the key areas in the social pillar that will bring transformation in the country. And looking at also the vision in education, we envision that we as a country will have quality, relevant, and inclusive training, education, and research aimed at sustainable development. And therefore, as I listened to the conversations, I was very excited because I've just finished an assignment with the Commission for University Education as in charge of accreditation of our universities. And therefore, one of the things that I did experience is that we truly mean to develop and to roll out very high skilled manpower, especially in STEM, because this will catalyze and it will even sustain our economic development as a country. But unfortunately, when you look at the status of the educational learning and teaching facilities, then we find that they are not commensurate with the need for accelerated development. One of the studies I did undertake, or a survey with my team then, which really surprised us, is the fact that when you look at the levels of enrollment in the non-STEM areas, we find an imbalance where we should be training in STEM areas, we are training in non-STEM areas. And therefore you find that even within the few that are trained within the STEM, we talked to the employers, And surprisingly, you hear words like half-baked, not ready, not market ready. And therefore the question of how relevant then is the training to be able to stimulate economic development in the country becomes a bit questionable. And therefore I anticipate that through this collaboration, there will be a way in which there will be empowerment to be able to improve not just the quality of STEM training, but also the relevance of the training to accelerate development. So that then, when we are thinking of even research in STEM, many of our academia, including our postgraduate students who want to really study and bring out innovative solutions to our problems, there is very little funding that supports this area of training, which is so critical for development. And therefore, as an academia, as a researcher, as a member of the higher education leadership, there is a lot of anticipation that this funding will go a long way, including the curriculum. Because, for example, if we want a good curriculum, there are certain things that the academia need to be undertaking. For example, they need to undertake alumni surveys. They want to find out the students that they trained in one cycle, how are they performing in the industry where they went to work, if they went to work at all. They want to be able to engage the employers themselves and find out to what extent are our employers satisfied. So employer satisfaction rates are data that probably would want to collect, but we haven't able to do this, to inform the areas that we need to really engage in development. And much more.
Yeah, we'll come to more of that in just a bit, but let me just get a feel of generally how significant you think this visit was. And Manyora, I'll come to you on this. Politically speaking, how significant was this?
Well, Trevor, we must understand what is going on within the context of the emerging new world order. You know, from the collapse of Berlin Wall that then ended the Cold War in 1990, America has been the sole superpower. Quietly, China was accumulating wealth, and it has invaded Africa. That has concerned America a lot. Read together with the new interest of Russia Russia stopped its interest in Africa when it ended experiments of socialism in even Kenya here, Uganda, trying to put, Zimbabwe and so on and so forth, and other places. But now it is coming in big force against the backdrop of what is happening again in the Sahel region, and those, what you might call troublesome states. America is finding itself in a situation where it must do something. Otherwise, there's going to be a new world order. You can also rope in BRICS and the affront even on the dollar, the dominance of the dollar. So then America must then come to Africa in a bigger force than ever before, because it might get too late. And Kenya then finds itself in a situation where it is an anchor state. America will be happy to support Kenya. America will be happy to do business with Kenya because of Kenya's geopolitical significance. It has always been very significant to America in terms of fighting terrorism in places like Sudan before, then Somalia, and Al-Qaeda pockets in Somalia, Sudan, other places like that. So, politically speaking, Kenya is important in that context, that America needs Kenya. A lot, perhaps, if you asked me, a lot more than Kenya could need America. But the question then, if you're talking about political significance, is that when you are embraced by a superpower like America, a lot of questions will be asked at home. So there are a lot of compromises you are going to make along the way. And this is going perhaps to generate a political heat. And in the days to come, the government of Kenya is going to have to deal with those kind of issues. That you are embracing America in a tight embrace, and there are lots of bad things that could come along. You remember, Trevor, we've been hit before, merely by associating with America. And now we are acquiring new status, new closeness. And then we are doing things like the Haiti things and so on and so forth. We may be bracing ourselves for a serious American base in Kenya. These are issues the government is going to deal with, and the people of Kenya will have to deal with these issues, including, for example, even this non-NATO ally status.
Yeah.
Is a question you want to ask yourself. Is it an issue the president can deal alone with unilaterally without involving the people of Kenya, perhaps parliament? And so this, in short, this is big. Kenya has gone into a big relationship. Very few countries in Africa are in this kind of relationship. There are lots of benefits to reap, you know, even from a military point of view. Being a non-NATO ally has meant Egypt, if you look at the map of powerful countries military-wise. Yeah. Egypt is not very down there, it's up there because of that relationship with America as a non-NATO ally. Yeah. So there's many good things are coming. But as usual, when you are working with a superpower and you are a small nation, yeah, some people feel you are being exploited. And those are the questions we'll have to deal with in future. Okay.
Dr. Jembo, are we being exploited or are we gaining more?
This is a two-way conversation, Trevor. And as others have said, there are benefits for America, and there are definitely a basket of goodies and benefits for Kenya. Exactly. And I want to say that it's not a very unthought or unplanned for visit. It was a visit on the back of the youth, if we look, has undertaken a visit on the backdrop of many challenges. The challenges recently of climate disaster, the floods in our country, the backdrop of the post-COVID scenario with the downturn of the economy following Ukraine, our youth bulge and the need for jobs and creativity to keep our youth engaged. These are challenges that are on the backdrop as our head of state reached out to visit the US. So he comes back with investments in security, in trade, in education, in health, in climate change, in infrastructure, both virtual and physical, and everybody's buzzing about this new highway to Mombasa, and others. And all of these involving the people of Kenya on the one hand, the government and private sector, both in Kenya and, of course, in the US. It's a very monumental moment for us as Kenyans. There's a lot to reap. And indeed, there will be challenges. There'll be questions asked. And many of them can be handled by the diplomats that will work alongside the head of state. You've heard us speak here about the potential for fallout with the US-China relationship. And I think there we are going to need to diplomatically balance and navigate the territories between the two major players. We do know that our indebtedness was one of the discussions at the table, especially as it relates to Kenya and China. But I think it's important that as diplomats, we stress that Kenya is non-aligned. And our head of state did say he's not looking east or west, rather forwards at where progress will be found. And that it will be a diplomatic activity to ensure that commitments made continue to be undertaken and completed, that communication to both sides will remain open, and that because of this new engagement, we're able to stabilize our economy, leverage our negotiations, and perhaps bring on board even other players by diversifying our strategy for the way we look for development aid and financing. Who knows, next we might bring India closer, Japan closer, the EU closer, and have a menu from which we can look at development financing. Yeah. So I do want to say that there will be the need for us to look at how we manage the diplomacy going forward so that we are able to
congratulate the effort that has been taken, because remember, for a long time, we used to be I would say a regional hegemony, or we used to be very active in this region. So I'm excited that Kenya is coming back, playing its role regionally and internationally. So this is something that I think is very exciting and very refreshing to see Kenya visible and coming out in this way. And that I think also is very important, because if you look at our region right now, we are not, we also have to look, I think also Kenya is an interesting country. We don't do things for just Kenya. We are always positioning ourselves in terms of what we are to gain in our region. So if you look at what is happening in our region right now in Ethiopia, Somalia, Sudan, so I think whatever we are going to do is also going to help our region, because this is not only for us, and you look at the investment also is quite robust and extended and in reaching out in terms of security and peace. Now, I know there's been a lot of myths that to demystify about the NATO non-member. So some people are thinking that, are we going to send troops to NATO? Are we going to make our troops go fight with NATO? Not true. We are not going to, we are not going to be obliged to contribute troops, but somehow it's strategic for us, and it's strategic also for the US to have us on board. And there has been countries in this continent that have had that status, such as Morocco, Tunisia, and Egypt. And of course, just security regime. And I think a lot of people have think that probably we are sending our troops to Haiti under NATO, but not necessarily, because this comes from resolution 2699, which Kenya is a member of United Nations. Kenya is an active member of the peacekeeping, peace-building commission. So we are known to be committed to peace. It's not the first time we are contributing to peacekeeping mission or security mission. We have done it in our continent. We did it in Kosovo, we did it in Pakistan, Iran, and Iraq, in Liberia, in so many places, and we are known for that. The other thing also, I don't want us to demoralize our police force, even though I think we need to think critically was it the police force that needed to be sent or the military? So also you have to realize that we have acquired a lot of experience from countering violent extremism or terrorism in the last decade. So I think we've been very active in that front, and we have created capacity in that front. So I think also the conversation is not whether we are sending the police. I think also we have a lot of perception about our police and all that, but also looking at the capacity that Kenya has to offer, the experience Kenya has to offer, and perhaps also the debate will be then, will that really build the professionalism?
Issues we're facing here internally.
So,
is that a fair argument, that we're facing a lot of challenges here in the country and we need them here?
So I think there are two things. One is about the perception we have. I said perception we have about our police, for a long time. Secondly, also, I think it's the fear of what we are exposing our police, but I think also is the capacity. Maybe we don't trust our police that much, and I think that comes from the perception, from the history that we have of our police, and of course the question of who are you sending? Are you going to send the anti-terror police, or are you going to send the Rex, or who? So I think it's just when you say general police. So ordinary Kenyan is just thinking of the man in blue, or the woman in blue, without really thinking much.
All right. Professor Murene, which one of all the deals that was gotten from the US, which one stands out for you and why? Or is it all of them?
I think two things can be mentioned. The president did appeal to the U.S. to persuade the World Bank and the IMF to ease up on the interest rates, exorbitant interest rates that those institutions charge on African countries. I think that request was received positively. Whether anything will come out of it is another matter. But it was received positively. The other thing that stands out is the promise of building a road from Nairobi to Mombasa. But that's not going to be done tomorrow. From the writing these things were said, it will take about 4 or 5 years before the road materializes. And then there are those discussions, negotiations that still have to go on. And it's not the US government building, it's just enabling the environment so that private sector, those various powerhouses, can agree on how to build the road and who is getting what cut where. So the road itself, if it materializes in 5 years, will be a major thing. But we have heard that before. It's not the first time we are being told about that road. So now the question that comes in, is this serious this time that it's going to be delivered? Or is it just another story we are told for excitement for now, for something like that? I think there is some seriousness into it. And if it materializes, then we might ask, can you now extend that road from Nairobi to Kampala? You know, is that 3-4 lane highway? It would be a very good thing. And if it happens, and I think part of the reason they came up with it is to try and counter the Chinese influence. Because there is a serious difference between the way the Chinese approach things and the way the Americans and the West approach things. Attitude is a major issue. The West, for some strange reason, has a very effective habit of delaying things. Okay, they say that we are doing feasibility studies, and then they tell you you are corrupt, and a lot of reasons why they do not deliver. So, but the bottom line is that they don't deliver.
Are their reasons valid when they say that we have too many bureaucracies? They're doing a feasibility study.
I think they try
such
to
a conversation.
Yes,
when the expressway comes, they'll on the land where it goes through.
Trevor, you're right that there are those things. We have those problems. Okay, but the final analysis, they don't deliver. Okay, now you put their competitors. Whatever excuses you give, they deliver.
You mean the Chinese, for example?
Yes, they do. Today in Nairobi here, who is undertaking all the major constructions? Ask yourself why. There is good, and that's what I'm saying, the attitude. The Americans and the others need to relook at their own attitude. The problem is that they don't deliver. So that's why I'm saying this is a very good idea, the project. And Kenya wants it. East Africa would like it. But there is a question, are they going to deliver? Or are they going to start looking for excuses why they cannot deliver?
All right.
This is something about the Haitian thing. Some of us have said before, so it's not news. Okay? I think the country will be blundering itself into chaos in Haiti. And I think maybe the message has started sinking, because now I notice that we are being told we are going to train the Haitian police here. They'll bring about 2,000 of them to Kenya for training. Maybe a few weeks. But it's a good start, train those people. But in terms of philosophy and thinking, it is not very wise. For you not even talk about that the court said it's wrong. But serious thinking about this thing, Kenya will be making the same mistake that the Americans made in Vietnam. Going there with this, they know better. They know what do those, bulldozing and self-righteousness. And that's one of the disturbing things. Think again.
All right. Let me bring in Professor Njoroge on this. Njoroge, for you, we will stick on the STEM side of things, the science and technology and engineering and mathematics. You mentioned quality and relevance of training vis-a-vis the accelerated development. In your view, should we be training our people for the future or our immediate problems now? Because there are those who are saying if we try to train them for the 21st century problems and we're not there yet, we fail to address the issues that we are facing now. What we end up with is a brain drain where they now live and go and practice their skills elsewhere?
Thank you very much, Trevor. And as I did indicate that most of the academia are very excited about the possibility of a big funding coming into the higher education and addressing this key subsector: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We should focus on both the short term, the long term, and while thinking of that, we are faced with a very important transition that higher education needs to transit from the current curriculum to now competence-based curriculum. It is our expectation, therefore, that a funding like this would go a long way in modernizing the infrastructure for teaching and learning, including pedagogical skills. One key element in enhancing the quality and relevance in STEM is the level of collaboration between the training institutions and the industry for which they are training. So I would expect that a strengthened approach whereby, not even strengthened, but structured, because the current system is such that individual lecturers, individual students, individual researchers do their own collaboration arrangements, either locally or even with other countries. But with an opportunity like this, it is possible now to structure our collaboration tomorrow. And another aspect in this area of STEM is placement of students. Currently, we don't have a structured way in which these students can be placed partially as they train in industry. Students are all over looking for opportunities for placement. But when we have an opportunity to structure our training through a collaboration like this, it can happen here in the country. Maybe in the US, there are opportunities where our own students, our staff, for example, can be retooled through practical experience using more modern technologies that we can apply today, and even those that we can apply in the future. So that strengthening of the link between the training institutions and the industry for which they are training is very important in absorbing the good that this opportunity brings. And therefore, the issue of now saying that our graduates are not market ready, I am sure we'll be able to use this opportunity to improve on that and therefore have more or less a market-ready graduate coming out of our institutions. Okay. Because what happens is that if they are engaged as they train, they will be able to solve some of the immediate problems that we have as they prepare themselves for the future and even in advancing their career, looking at bigger and wider and futuristic approaches.
All right. Manyora, you mentioned that we have to be careful with the emerging new order and ensure that we don't compromise too much for America. What are some of the compromises that you're seeing, and how do we ensure as a country that we are not exploited by the U.S.?
Let's start with what Macharia said, that Americans will promise you a road and they don't do it. Others have added 477 billion, would translate to $1 billion per kilometer, which is way too expensive. Now, you see, a man cannot ride your back unless it is bent. And this is now where Kenyans must come in. If a guy is bringing you something good, but he's coming with certain clever tricks, For 77, you could find 77 billion is on things like feasibility studies where the road will pass, and you have your own engineers. They should be able to say, no, we are giving you the designs ourselves. We have the qualification to give you the designs. They can tell you a big component of that amount of money is equipment, machinery, and what have you, and expertise. You should be able to tell them we have achieved technology transfer over the years because of the projects we have done, and we are able to do 1, 2, 3. Certainly, there will be many compromises, including losing some of your friends. You remember recently when we voted at the UN on the matters of Palestine, I don't think Americans were very pleased. I very much doubt if that vote was being taken today with our new status, I suspect we may not have voted that. So some of the compromises may be that our new friend may want his friends to be our friends and his enemies to be our enemies. This is the risk you take. You have to weigh. That's why I'm saying, if you are going to make certain compromises, what are you going to get? Don't look at it as like somebody's doing you a favor. Because certainly there are many compromises we will have to make in this new relationship with America, okay? And as you make those compromises, you also extract something out of the deal, okay? The problem we do, one thing that makes me very happy in this deal is the private sector component of the deal. Look, for example, at health. You know, America has enough money to provide free health to its citizens, okay? But it doesn't do so. It likes to do it through the private sector. So if you look at the new deal with this route of trip from America, you realize they are roping in the whole arrangement, private, true to the way they do their things. It is going to be, as we engage on public issues like training, like research with Cambridge, CDC, and so on and so forth, we need to rope in the private players in the health sector. So, for example, a hospital like Nairobi Hospital, it has a pool of consultants, specialized doctors. Yeah. So there isn't something you can really be doing at a serious scale, even if it be the fight against HIV, AIDS, or public health, or whatever it is, or development of vaccine, or whatever it is you are doing on malaria, without involving an institution like Nairobi Hospital, because of its capacity. Because there are certain things that you can only find at Nairobi Hospital. So by strengthening, for example, those hospitals, then the idea of assisting this country in the area of health then becomes a little more successful than it would have been if all the aid, if it is aid or support, is channeled strictly to government.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Dr. Jambo, from a diplomatic perspective, the president spoke about the stifling of democracy by the Western nations based on their lending rate to developing countries. From where you stand, is there a correlation between what they give and the democracy of the third world countries?
Thank you. Let me take a step back and then come to the table on that. My sister has also mentioned that as a result of this US state visit, Kenya gains credence as a global leader, and that leadership is translated into leadership within Africa and even within East Africa. So we are talking about the developing world setting and Kenya's emergence on the platform as a leader within Africa. And then you talk a little bit about the relations with the US and stifling democracy in developing world settings. I think one of the things that was iterated and reiterated at that visit was our shared values. Our values for democracy, for equity and equality, and I think for openness,
good governance,
transparency, good governance. And those are shared values. And because of those shared values, this partnership between us was made possible. And so if you look at the raft of goodies that came back, there's a lot of support for the issues of democracy. I think if you look at it, there was money given for the efforts of anti-corruption. A large amount of money, in fact, went to anti-corruption, I think in the order of $300 million.
True.
There was money given to the IBC, a smaller amount, to support the IBC as it undertakes work with political parties and itself as a secretariat, and I think civic education. Yeah. There is other money, I think, given to the National Police Service, not necessarily for the activity like has been mentioned in Haiti, but to improve it, modernize it and professionalize it. That's a very important part of stimulating our democracy. There'll be money given to political parties, but specifically to train women. That's another part of enhancing democracy. So there are many facets in which there was money given for improving democracy. And I think this is a reflection of the shared agenda around democratic governance. I want to say that sometimes we feel a little stifled when we put on the table an agreement with China and that with the US, and we find conditionalities in that of the US around democracy and good governance, transparency and accountability. But they have also made it possible for us to address those issues by the raft of goodies that they have provided for us. But on the other hand, as my senior brother Herman says, the Chinese may be offering us something which appears to be a little easier, but itself has conditionalities in terms of payment and therefore indebtedness in the long term. So those may be the issues that one wants to consider. Okay. But like I've said earlier, it behooves us to look at the commitments made and ensure that we deliver against them in a timely manner. So that at no point do we say this has stifled other development or slowed down development, because sometimes when we don't deliver, a donor or development partner may say, okay, I slowed down my implementation. China might say, I'll slow it down, or I may not come to the table next time and ask.
Because most of the time the US bases it on milestones. They will say that once this is achieved, then the next tranche of funding comes. If it is not achieved, then it is paused.
That's true. And so the issue of implementation becomes very important, and looking at and monitoring that implementation. But before we can get there, there's also the citizens' dialogue. How do we portray ourselves? We do have our differences of opinion back home. But I think that when goodies such as these are provided to us, it's important that we bring to the table a front which is or appears on the external face to be forward-looking and out-looking, so that we are able to harness what is already signed. Because we're talking now of agreements. We need to pull them down, implement them, and implement them in a timely fashion. And keep the communication going.
All right. I have to take a quick break now. When you come back, I'll take a look at some of your feedback and then take closing remarks from my guest on which way forward after this at Trevor Mbidi at Citizen TV Kenya. It is the #Monday Report. I'll see you in just a bit.